So, what is the appropriate task for economists? What is it that they should really be trying to answer, give us a plan? Well, let's go over this methodically. Okay, so let's just sort of step by step. So, we recognize that the important task for economists is to tell us what policies the government should follow. Okay, so that's an important task, right? It's very important because we want the society to succeed, and economic policies the government follows has a very large impact on whether the society succeeds. And we generally look to economists to tell us what those economic policies should be. Okay, so, okay, that's clear. Now, how do economists, like most economists today, the way they approach a problem is to create a model. And a model can also be non-mathematical. And there's a section in my video which talks about what is science and what is not science. And if the model is non-mathematical, then its usefulness depends on the wisdom of the person who has created the model. Okay, but so let's stay with these mathematical models for now. So you have a mathematical model, you have these macroeconomic mathematical models. They are based on rational agents who maximize the utility, firms which maximize their profits, and then you build a nice model, and then you see whether these models actually are consistent with the whatever observations you have from the world, and you say yes. I mean, there's a fair amount of support for these models. However, what you're trying to do is you're trying to say what is the policy that we should follow. And so you have a model which looks like, describes the world reasonably well. So the next question is, what is the policy suggested by this model? Now, when you try to answer that question, there has to be an objective function in your model. You say you have a model and you're going to change some policy. Let's say you're going to change the tax rate, you're going to change the tariff rates. And then you say, okay, this is what the model says the policy should be for taxes. And then the question is, when you say this is what the policy should be, what exactly, why is the model saying that? Because in a mathematical model which makes a recommendation, there has to be an objective function. Without an objective function, what are you doing with that model anyway? So there has to be an objective function, and that objective function for economic models is the social utility function. But what I have found in my economics education is that there was not really much discussion about the social utility function. And because there was no discussion of the social utility function, then there was this GDP, which became the stealth social utility function. You have a model and you say, okay, if I tweak the taxes this way, or if I tweak the tariffs this way, then I'm going to get higher GDP. So GDP becomes the social utility function, even though it is not explicitly said that it is the social utility function. So it is really the stealth social utility function. And using the stealth social utility function is at the root of many economic and social problems, because when you use the GDP, you are essentially ignoring inequality, economic inequality. You're saying that if someone who's earning $100 million a year and that person earns $1 more, or somebody who's earning $100,000 a year, that person earns $1 more, then for the society, the impact is the same. And obviously, that can't be right, because we do live in a democracy. We do have a social contract which says that the government has the right to set taxes. We do have elections which say that the voters have the right to choose elections, and we do actually have progressive taxation. It's nothing novel that I'm saying. We do have progressive taxation. And what is a progressive taxation? The progressive taxation is an attempt to address economic inequality. So every model should have a objective function to determine equality, and then once you have that objective function, the social utility function, which you get away from, you get away from this GDP, and you can kind of I remember one thing which I had read once is that, don't take GDP, instead take the sum of logs of the incomes of various things. So of course, when you take log, then you are reducing the $1 impact on larger incomes compared to smaller incomes. And that's one way to address thing. And you can sort of have different ways you can think of how the social utility function can be modified to take into account inequality. And like I said, it's not a novel idea, right? This is actually the world we live in. We already live in a world where we have democratic elections. The voters have the right to choose the government. The government has the right to set taxes, and the government sets taxes which are progressive. Income taxes are progressive. Of course, by the end of the day, maybe there are enough loopholes put in there which make them not progressive, but at least the official line is that we need progressive taxation to reduce inequality. Okay, so you have, once you understand that, okay, you need the social utility function, you have two things to do then. Okay, the first is if you're going to reduce inequality and so you're trying to kind of maximize your social utility function, what instrument should you be using? And the second one is, who should decide the weights in the social utility function? Okay, now the most likely instrument for is fiscal policy. It's not like you can broadly divide economic policies into fiscal policy and monetary policy. In my opinion, monetary policy is essentially for stability, or it's for reducing volatility in the economy. It is fiscal policy, which is the government's taxation and spending policies, which are to be used as the instrument to maximize social utility, and the in particular, the forms which I believe should be used are proportional taxes, and these proportional taxes can be very large negative towards the bottom and large positive towards the top. And how large positive and how, and why proportional taxes? Because proportional taxes keep intact the virtues of the free market, the two virtues of the free market which are absolutely important: accountability and incentives. Okay, so these keep intact those virtues. And then the question is, okay, how what should be the amount of these taxes, these negative and positive taxes, combination of negative and positive taxes? Well, given that we live in a democracy and the voters get to choose, I mean, I have an idea what this should be, but I'm just one voter out of millions, right? And so it's basically, this is what different candidates for office, that's what they should campaign on. They should say, okay, this is the amount of negative taxes that I'm going to put on income for the lower earners and so on. So then the voters would decide which candidate has the best set of taxes. So this is the task really for economists. The task for economists is to give us a model with a social utility function, and in those functions there would be parameters, and they would explain how these how these parameters would affect social utility, and then the voters get to decide what exactly should be the different weights in the social utility function. Bottom line, you can't just ignore social utility function and pretend that the GDP is the social utility function, because that is leading to a lot of problems.